Hello everyone, we're looking at making food production efficient for lesson B18.11. Your objectives for this lesson are to explain why shorter food chains make food production more efficient, and you need to be able to evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of efficient food production. Your quick task is to recall from your previous learning how do mammals lose energy and therefore biomass. So, pause the video while you write down your title, date and objectives, complete your quick task and press play when you're ready to move on. And here's your answer for the quick task. Now, we looked at this slide in a previous lesson, so we can try to recall some of the ways in which mammals lose energy. So first of all, mammals need to self-regulate their body temperature. They do this through respiration, releasing heat. So in this image, we can see some little monkeys curling up, trying to keep warm in the snow, and they try to keep their own body temperature at a constant state. That requires a lot of energy. The next thing that requires the most amount of energy is movement. So that could be movement for general reasons, moving around, migrating, grazing. But in this instance of the tiger, it might be that the animal needs to move a lot to hunt or to find prey or to find food. So movement is the second main way in which animals lose energy. Another way in which animals lose energy is reproduction. So it could be finding a mate, displaying for a mate, producing offspring, and then in the case of mammals, feeding them using milk. So another way in which mammals lose energy is through the reproductive processes. And lastly, not all the food that animals eat is thoroughly digested. Some comes out as waste, so in the production of feces and urea. So that biomass that they eat, not all of it is taken inside their bodies and used. Some of that is not properly digested and is egested or pooped out or urinated out in the case of needed proteins. Okay, so here's your starter. We've got some images here showing energy at trophic levels. What I'd like you to do is compare the pictures and try to explain the differences in biomass at the top level. So you could do this by writing, you could do this by thinking about it, or if you're watching the video with someone, ideally, then that means you can talk about it. Then I want you to think about what the word efficient means. When we're talking about the word efficient in science, what does that mean? So pause the video, have a think about this diagram and the questions, and press play when you're ready for the answers. Looking at the answer to question 1, looking at the different pictures and explaining the difference in biomass at the top level, what we've got here is at the bottom level on this pyramid here, you've got plants. The plants are eaten by fish. Those fish are then dried and ground into animal feed. So pigs are omnivores, they eat plants and animals. So the ground up fish is used as feed for the pig in the farms. And last of all, humans eat pig meat. Okay, so you've got 4 trophic levels here in this food chain, four levels. And at each stage, between the plants and the fish, this much energy is being lost. And then between the fish and the pigs, this much energy or biomass is being lost. And between the pigs and the humans, this much biomass or energy is being lost. So the humans are only getting this small amount of energy here. Whereas if we look at this food pyramid here, where the plants are directly fed to the pigs, we've only got 3 trophic levels. So plants are eaten by pigs, pigs are eaten by humans. There's only 3 levels. And also you can see that the amount of energy lost here and here means that humans actually get more energy. So here the humans are getting this much biomass, whereas here the humans make up this much biomass. So the less number of levels you have in a food chain, or the less number of trophic levels you have, the more energy is conserved as you go up. Obviously the best food pyramid to show biomass being passed to humans would be this layer being plants, and then the next level being humans. Now it wouldn't be super efficient because humans find it easier to digest animal matter, chew and swallow and digest that with the enzymes. There's more in the digestive system, there's more energy there for them, but it would still be far more efficient to only have 2 levels in that food chain. So efficient means how much energy is conserved. We don't want to waste energy. Efficiency is to do with using energy in a useful way and not allowing energy to be wasted. So in this example here, on this food pyramid, energy is being wasted because there's a lot of levels involved, whereas this is the most efficient food pyramid. Okay, so one of the things we can do in order to make food production more efficient is have less trophic levels. What I'd like you to do is get these keynotes down, fill in the gaps, and when you're ready to, pause the video as you're doing it. When you're ready to, press play and we'll go through the answers. So the answers to your keynotes for this lesson. In a longer food chain, the last animal in the food chain gets less energy than it would in a shorter food chain, as biomass is lost at each trophic level. If humans only ate plant matter, we would have more than enough food for everyone, but food preferences are for meat, eggs and dairy. Meat is easier to digest and get most of the energy from, so farmers sometimes feed ground up fish to pigs, chickens and other fish. This actually makes the food chain longer and therefore less efficient. To make food production more efficient, humans should eat less meat and eat more plant-based foods. Okay, here's another slide that normally I'd give you some time to think and chat about in class, so have a think about it, write some notes if you want to, and if you're watching the video with someone, talk to them about it. So, which cow will retain the most biomass, which will lose the most? So, pause the video, look at the slide, have a think about it, and then we'll go through the answers. As I'm sure you've correctly guessed, this cow will lose the most biomass. It's roaming outdoors, so it's moving around a lot, and it's a cold environment, so it's having to maintain its body temperature and use more energy in order to do that. This cow is in a warm environment, so it's still using energy roaming around, but it's warm, so it doesn't have to use as much energy in respiration to keep its body temperature the same. So the cow using the most energy is this one. The cow using the second most amount of energy is this one. And lastly, this cow here is fairly stationary. It's just sitting down in its nice soft hay here, and it's staying indoors where it's nice and warm. So it's not losing energy by moving around, and it's not losing energy by trying to keep itself warm. So this cow is going to retain the most biomass. So what does that mean in terms of farming? Well, one of the problems that we have is that people want to buy cheap meat. So in supermarkets and big shops, cheap meat is sought after. In order to produce that meat as cheaply and as quickly as possible, we restrict animals' movements. So we stop them from moving around, we keep them indoors and keep them warm, and that means production is more efficient. We're not losing energy from them moving around, we're not losing energy from them having to regulate their own body temperature. So keeping animals warm indoors and stopping them from moving around is efficient. However, it's not actually very nice for the animals to be stuck indoors all day in a restricted area, not doing their natural behaviours and things like that. So actually the best kind of meat to buy in terms of welfare would be free range organic, or if you're looking at beef, it's pasture for life. Now those types of meat are better for the animals. The animals are happier, they can move around, they can live their lives as they would naturally. So it's higher welfare, so the animals are happier, but it's more expensive and it's less efficient. Okay, so a lot of the energy eaten by those animals is used up, sorry I can't spell today, is used up by them moving around, trying to keep warm, etc. in the outdoors, but you know, that's where they're happy. So these are things that we have to consider when we're looking at farming. Again, if we were in class, I'd get some of you guys to maybe read this out if you wanted to volunteer to do so, and then discuss it and see who you felt you agreed and disagreed with. So let's start up in the top left. This guy is saying, we shouldn't exploit and hurt animals just so that we can eat animal products. I'm a vegan and there are plenty of food alternatives available. The lady to the right with the green box. I like eating meat, but I feel uncomfortable eating factory farmed animals. I buy free range organic meat and eat less meat overall. I like vegetarian food too. Person in the bottom left corner, the yellow speech bubble. I'm a low-income earner and I simply cannot afford to eat expensive vegan foods that are priced for middle-class people. I have a family to feed and factory farmed meat is cheap and nutritious. And lastly, the person in the bottom right is a farmer. Farming is getting harder and harder. Supermarkets demand that we farmers provide cheap meat, milk and eggs. I find it hard to balance the best animal welfare with cheap pricing. So if you want to pause that and have a think about it, think about the person that you most likely agree with or what your opinions are. That's fine. Have a pause, think about it, talk about it if you want to, if there's someone there to have a chat about, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, what I'd like you to do is copy this table into your books, and you've got lists of sentences. I want you to decide whether these are advantages or disadvantages in terms of intensive farming. So complete the table and tick the right column whether you think it's an advantage or a disadvantage, and then I'll go through the answers with you. Okay, so here are your answers. Limiting the movement of an animal means it gains more biomass. In terms of farming, that's an advantage. Limiting the movement of an animal can be considered cruel. That's obviously a disadvantage because it's not really very nice for the animal. Keeping animals in a barn means the animals don't get to roam freely outdoors. Well, that's a disadvantage because animals like to move around and display their natural behaviours. A temperature-controlled barn means animals don't lose biomass at trying to keep warm. Well, that's an advantage because it means that we got more efficient food production. Chickens kept close together indoors have a higher chance of spreading diseases. Oh, that's meant to be a disadvantage. Okay, so it's a disadvantage. Chickens kept indoors spreading diseases is a bad thing. Animals kept outdoors can be exposed to cold, rainy, harsh weather. That's a disadvantage because actually if you have cows that have the option of going out to graze or going into a barn, which is what Pasture for Life is all about, the cows have to spend 51% of their time outdoors, but they've got a barn to go into if they so choose to. So when it's cold or wet or miserable, the cows will actually choose to move inside the barn and just stay indoors warm. The same as humans would. You know, if it's a cold, rainy day outside, you don't want to be out there messing about. You want to be indoors sort of staying warm and keeping safe. Antibiotics are overused in intensive farming, leading to antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria. Antibiotics can build up in the food chain. That's a disadvantage because we need antibiotics for curing diseases and we don't want antibiotic-resistant strains of diseases developing because they can be really dangerous both for animals and if they mutate and pass into humans, that could be dangerous too. Lastly, intensive farming systems are being developed and improved. The UK has a Grade A rating for farm animal welfare. That's an advantage because actually the UK compared to other countries is actually really good in terms of animal welfare and a lot of the meat we produce. So it's definitely something to consider and we're always trying to strive to have better animal welfare. So it's good that as a country we have these things in place and that we are trying to make things better for animals. Okay, the last thing you need to know about for this lesson is a bit more information about fish farming. So what happens is it might be in a lake or a pond, it might be somewhere where you dig it up and build your own artificial pond or fish ponds like this picture here. It's actually been purposefully dug out to have farms. And another way that fish are farmed is actually in the sea in cages. So they have these massive sort of cages that are underwater but in the sea because they need that saline salt water to survive. So let's see what these bullet points are saying here. So the fish in the oceans are being overfished and numbers are going down. That's leading to extinction of some species of fish. A lot of species are at risk or endangered. In fish farms, large numbers of fish are kept in cages in lakes or in the sea or in tanks. So here in this image we can see some tanks. And all those little wiggly black lines you can see here, these are the little fish and they're a bit cramped. I don't know if they're feeling very happy right now. So the fish in these cages or in the tanks, they don't move much and they don't need to keep warm. Fish are not endothermic animals, they are ectothermic. They just change to the temperature of their surroundings, so you don't need to keep them warm. So they gain biomass very quickly. They're easy to farm, easy to grow. You feed them, they grow nice and fat nice and quickly. They are fed using ground up fish or by using cereals, so it's quite easy to feed them. But there's obviously some ethical concerns because, you know, these fish in these cramped up conditions, you know, they're cramped together, it might not be a very happy place for them to be, and they can't do their normal activities like migrating and swimming around the world and doing whatever it is they normally do. So there are some ethical concerns about intensive fish farming. So that's basically all the subject knowledge information you need for this lesson. So next we've got an exam question. I'd like to pause the video, read it carefully and complete the first 2 questions. The second part of this question is a long answer. As you can see, it's worth 4 marks. So make sure you make 4 salient points and make sure that you write it in a short paragraph that actually makes sense, is logical, you're using good grammar, okay? So pause the video, answer this question as best you can, and we'll go through the mark scheme. So here are your answers. Now, the question actually said in it, some people say pig farming like this is unethical. Give 2 other reasons it's a disadvantage to farm pigs like this. So because they already said unethical in the question, you can't actually use that in the answer, okay? So the answers that you are allowed are that in intensive farms, diseases spread more rapidly. You could have said either antibiotics can build up in the food chain or the overuse of antibiotics are a bad thing. So it's one of those, you can't say antibiotics twice. And the third answer they would have given you is an increased use of fossil fuels to heat the barn. I think that's a bit of a tenuous one there, but I wouldn't have expected anyone to get that because it's not actually something you necessarily directly learn about in the lesson. But I do think that if you know about diseases spreading more rapidly and antibiotic overuse and that it's unethical, even though they already give you that in the question, those are the main disadvantages they're looking at when you're thinking about factory farmed animals. Okay, for the second part of the question, the 4-mark one, first thing that the examiner will do is read your paragraph right the way through and decide whether it's a level 1 or a level 2 answer. If it's level 1, it might be very simple statements made, no attempt to link your explanations. Whereas a level 2 answer is all clear statements made and they are linked to relevant explanations. So first thing you need to do is read what you've written, think, is it clear? Does it make sense? Have I linked the explanation to how it increases the efficiency of food production? And of course, if you've put nothing, you would get 0 marks. Then they'll look at the indicative content. So some of the statements you might have made are kept inside or kept in a temperature controlled environment. And then the explanation for that, how they actually increase the efficiency of food production, would be linking that statement to this statement. Less energy or heat is lost in controlling the body temperature, or less energy is required for movement. Also, that statement links to, this statement links to this answer, and this statement, kept enclosed or in a restricted environment, means less energy required for movement. So those are the links you'd have had to make. And lastly, in order to link it to the idea of efficiency, so energy being available for useful uses, i.e. growth, more energy is available for growth and less energy is transferred or wasted by transferring it to the environment. So that's the sort of answer they're looking for, something that really clear and logically makes sense. Quite tricky, but I reckon you guys can do it if you just keep on practicing. Okay, so going back to the objectives for this lesson, can you explain why shorter food chains make food production more efficient? How confident are you? Smiley middle sad face. Evaluate the advantages and disadvantages of efficient food production. Again, smiley middle or sad face. So once you have evaluated yourself against these objectives, think about your further study. Do you need to look at free science lessons, Primrose Kitten or the Amoeba Sisters on YouTube? Do you need to go to your textbook and make sure you've gone through the information there? Do you need to try BBC Bite Size? Whatever study method you prefer, do your further study, make sure you understand this 100%, and we're nearly at the end of this topic. Well done for your hard work today, everyone.